Okay, so preparation. What is preparation? Well, being prepared helps mitigate the risk. Okay, there's an old saying that chance favors the prepared mind. And basically, it goes hand in hand. Actually, there's probably 5,000 different sayings you can think of. When opportunity knocks, answer the door, so on and so forth, right? So we want to make sure that we're prepared. And that means we need to go through drills. We need to make sure we have things documented ahead of time. We want to make sure everything that we can do ahead of time to make things as quick and easy and as painless as possible is done, so that when an incident does happen, we can shorten that time to resolution. All right, nothing worse than being in a crisis situation that just drags on and drags on forever. All right, we want to make sure when that thing hits, we know what to do quickly, and we can mitigate and remediate as quickly as possible. So, part of that process is to establish a methods and procedures, or a MOP, right? Basically identifying a chain of command, any investigative procedures that may need to be put in place, evidence retention policies and procedures, and remediation processes. All right, so in other words, with the chain of command, who do we need to contact? Should it be a direct supervisor? Should it be a director or a VP? Should it be our HR department or our legal department? Okay, things along those lines. We'll talk about that more in just a few. Investigative procedures. Not every single thing needs to be investigated at the same level. Is it simply maybe an anomaly? Is it a malicious attack, or is it a criminal type of investigation? So the nature of that incident will dictate really the level of investigative process that takes place. And then evidence retention, again, is it something that's very quick and not necessarily impactful to the business? Or is it a criminal investigation, perhaps maybe a very widespread malicious attack that we need to retain that evidence, because there's a good chance we're going to try to prosecute. And as we've talked about previously, prosecution sometimes can take months or years. So if we don't have that information documented properly, that could really affect our ability to prosecute down the road. And then again, remediation processes. What are we doing to quickly contain and eliminate that threat, so that we can understand how to do it going forward if in fact we run into that same situation again? Also, with preparation, we need to identify the issues, all right, if multiple. Again, as we can see here, they keep calm and be prepared. All right, there's, again, thousands of these different keep calm signs for pretty much anything you can think of. They've got one. I was actually surprised to see that there was a be prepared one. But basically, we want to make sure that we can understand the priority. So if we have multiple things happening, we have to assess the priority, or triage, right? Much like we have an emergency room situation where you'll have an ER setting where they'll go in and they'll triage. They'll basically say, okay, this person is much more critical than this person. Well, that person who has a much more life-threatening injury would or should get care first. Okay, so it's a matter of prioritization. We need to assess so that we can make sure we direct our resources to the most critical things first. All right, we want to work on the most critical issues first. And our ultimate goal, obviously, is to get the business back up and running as quickly as possible. So some of those things that we might need to do in kind of tandem or in parallel with our efforts might be to patch, upgrade, or bring new systems online. All right, we want to prevent a reoccurrence. So patching, we may have like a 0-day vulnerability identified as an example that wasn't necessarily known about before, but as soon as that becomes evident and it's now obviously been exploited, we need to put systems in place and have the personnel up and running quickly that we can patch. All right, now that may not sound like a big deal if you're a small mom and pop shop and you may have 3 or 4 systems to worry about. But if you're a large enterprise and you literally have thousands of servers, tens of thousands of desktops spread across multiple locations, that's a much bigger ordeal. All right, so you have to have a very regimented and documented process in place to handle those types of situations. And again, document the process and the steps taken, not just for what's happening currently, but so it can be kind of put into a lessons learned or a post-incident review type situation. All right, so that knowledge transfer between groups or departments is critical for obviously not only the situation that's happening currently, but going forward, because that situation that you just ran into or just successfully kind of wandered through it and mitigated the end result, or mitigated the damage, right? You remediated to the point where now it's over and done with. It's now in the past. You may run into that situation again in a week, or it may be a month, or you may not run into that same type of situation again for a year or two. Having that knowledge transfer or those steps documented can help you go back and see what you did previously. Or if you move on, or whatever personnel changes hands, responsibilities change hands, that information needs to go to the new people as well from a business perspective. All right, we want to make sure that the business can get up and running and recover as quickly as possible. And then also we can identify gaps, perhaps in our knowledge or perhaps in our systems, so we can potentially establish new standards going forward. Something else to consider when we're talking about preparation and being prepared for incidents, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, which is basically from the U.S. Department of Commerce, has a computer security and incident handling guide. All right, so that is basically a special publication, 800-61, and it's a 79-page document outlining procedures for handling, okay, whatever type of security incident you may come across. Okay, it can be used as guidance in formulating your own incident response plans. All right, so it's a very detailed document of how to handle different types of situations. And then proper preparation ensures you can communicate in the event of an incident. All right, because what happens if your corporation or your company heavily relies on email? That's great, most companies do. But what happens if part of that incident that you're now experiencing knocks out your email system? All right, if you have no email and you completely rely on it, well, then you're dead in the water. All right, so you have to make sure that you have contingency plans, sometimes known as in-band or out-of-band communication methods, right? Email, text, social media. You may post to a bulletin board. You may have a voicemail system where people can call in and just get updates so everyone knows where to go for information. All right, a phone tree and contact lists, things along these lines. All right, we also want to make sure from a preparation standpoint that we have equipment needed to handle the incident. All right, whether that be specialized laptops, forensics tools, cameras, evidence collection bags or tags, things along these lines, right? Chain of custody forms. So depending upon, again, the nature of the breach, the nature of the incident, we have to have specialized equipment at certain times to handle that. And if we never give it any thought and we have nothing set up ahead of time, when that incident actually happens, not only is it going to drag out longer now because we're not prepared, it could potentially be devastating to a company because, again, depending on the nature of it, if it goes on for days, weeks, or months, that could completely destroy consumer confidence, stock investors, things along those lines. So it could be very devastating to a company. And we also need to make sure that we have a clear definition of roles and responsibilities. Again, prepare properly. Who does what and where should information be stored, etc. Right? So we want to make sure that everybody knows what role they play in the grand scheme of things, where information should be stored. Is it a common folder structure? Is it someplace on our network that is secure that we can upload all of our documents to? Maybe a SharePoint site or some type of document repository. All of these things should be outlined and then occasionally practiced. All right, some types of drills are gone through occasionally, which no one likes, myself included. Everybody hates to do any type of DR or business continuity planning. But again, it's very critical that we understand these things actually work before we really need to have them put in place. All right, so occasionally test your policies and your procedures.